Hello and welcome to Watching Newsbreak. I am Vedant Agarwal. Our special focus on the show this evening, well, Muhammad Yunus's Hindu outreach. This, as he has made it clear in a recent statement, that there will be no discrimination on religious grounds. In fact, he has said that we are committed to building an inclusive and non-discriminatory government. This has challenges are aplenty for the new government, the new dispensation in Bangladesh. But how should India read Muhammad Yunus's strategy? Of course, while he talks about an inclusive government, he's also reached out to China. He has asked China to set up solar factories or reset solar factories to Bangladesh. So, of course, the China outreach also is something that's made India wary and circumspect. But putting the focus on the situation of minorities in Bangladesh, reports continue of isolated attacks on minorities. But how can Muhammad Yunus actually obliterate communal violence as far as Bangladesh is concerned and establish a dispensation that is all-inclusive and egalitarian? Joining me on the show this evening, I'm being joined by Prabhu Dayal, who is a former ambassador. I will be joined by Mr. Prabhu Dayal, one of India's senior-most diplomats and somebody who has really watched the geopolitical situation unfold in his long career. Also with me, Parvez Karim Abbasi, Assistant Professor of Department of Economics at the East West University. Thanks both very much. Going across to you first, Ambassador Dayal. How do you see the situation in Bangladesh? Of course, Muhammad Yunus has said that it will be an all-inclusive government and that there will be no discrimination on religious grounds. But at the same time, he's reached out in a sense to China, though of course that is a different aspect altogether. But India is watching the situation, with some sense of caution, but also there is hope that Muhammad Yunus would be able to, in a sense, build an all-inclusive government.
Well, thanks for having me on your show, Vedant. There have been reports of widespread attacks on Hindus who constitute roughly 7% of Bangladesh's total population. I've been here in the United States since about 6 weeks, and the media here has also covered in fair amount of detail the reports of such attacks. Now, during the agitation and protests against Sheikh Hasina's government, Hindu temples, businesses and homes were attacked by mobs, upset by what they saw was the support of the Hindu community to Sheikh Hasina's Awami League party. And as a result, Hindu temples were reportedly desecrated, properties belonging to the Hindu community were attacked by mobs, and Hindus were targeted. Now, it is very heartening to note that the chief advisor of the Bangladesh government, Mr. Muhammad Yunus, has said that protection would be given to Hindus and their safety and security would be ensured. I'm sure he realizes that a close relationship with India works to Bangladesh's advantage. You know, one of the biggest achievements of former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was the impressive economic progress of the country during the last decade or so. And significantly, during her tenure from 2009 to 2024, Bangladesh's economy had grown at an average rate of 6.3% per annum, right, which was among the highest in the world. And the size of its GDP more than trebled from US dollars 123 billion to US dollars 455 billion. The per capita income also increased significantly. And Mr. Muhammad Yunus is an economist. He knows how the relationship with India is important for Bangladesh's economy.
So, Ambassador, you are in a sense hopeful, you are optimistic, cautiously optimistic rather, that Muhammad Yunus will be able to, in a sense, curb the attacks on minorities. But I can see Parvez Karim Abbasi smiling to that. Abbasi sahab, what is your opinion? as far as the situation in Bangladesh is concerned vis-a-vis minorities. Though, of course, many in the government have also said that it's not widespread violence against minorities. There are some fringe elements or perhaps marginalized, elements on the margins who have unleashed this kind of violence, and they're isolated incidents, and there's no widespread violence against minorities. Mr. Abbasi, if you can hear me.
Yeah.
All right, we seem to have a network issue there, but Ambassador Dayal, would you like to weigh in on that? That it seems to be isolated attacks as per many within the government and not widespread violence. But though, of course, that is something that cannot be confirmed because there are many unsubstantiated reports. But the fact of the matter is that, the situation of the minorities does remain grim.
There is no doubt that there were a number of attacks of a fairly serious nature on the Hindu minority community, as also, of course, some of the other minorities like the Buddhists. And that is why Mr. Muhammad Yunus has gone out of his way to try and assure the Hindu minority community that the new government will be protective towards them and will try to ensure their security. Very significantly, there have been reports that on the occasion of Janmashtami yesterday,
yes,
Mr. Muhammad Yunus met the Hindu community and said that there would be protection accorded to them, and that he also hosted a reception for them. So this gesture is significant. And the fact that he went out of his way to host this reception and send a message indicates that there were some concerns globally about what was happening in Bangladesh.
Exactly. That's an important point that you make. That, the world is watching Bangladesh. The world is watching the Indian subcontinent, given the fact that there is an unprecedented situation really unfolding as far as Bangladesh is concerned. I can see Abbasi sir back with us. Mr. Abbasi, as far as the situation in Bangladesh is concerned, many observers have pointed out that we can go back to a time where there is space ceded to extremism, to fringe elements in Bangladesh. But one must also realize the geopolitical situation has changed drastically as far as the subcontinent is concerned. India's position in the subcontinent and indeed in the world has changed drastically as well. So do you think that the geopolitical compulsions of Mr. Muhammad Yunus vis-a-vis India will in a sense force him to make sure that the minorities in Bangladesh are safe?
Well, thank you, Vidana. And again, I was listening to the ambassador's version of events. And again, each one is entitled to his own opinion. Yes, there has been regrettable attacks on our Hindu minority brothers. But we must also, without condoning this, we must also state that, again, rise of religious intolerance has been endemic across the subcontinent. What one needs to bear out that, or in mind, that again, these attacks have not been only carried out against Hindu minority communities, but these attacks have also been carried out on public installations. And again, criminal elements or fringe elements have taken advantage of a breakdown of lawlessness. And what has happened is that this has drawn universal condemnation across all segments and all sections of the party or of Bangladesh, which includes, again, the interim government of Dr. Yunus and even the major political parties. And even, in fact, not only did Dr. Yunus go and visit the Thakeshwari temple and host the delegation over there, but he also had incidents of, again, students and, again, clergy from the madrasas protecting the religious institutions. So there has been a closing of ranks. First of all, I would like to reiterate this as much as possible. And we also should not forget that, again, what has happened over here is not basically, this has been a people's revolution, so to speak. So a dictatorial regime which has had very little connect with the ordinary people of Bangladesh, that has been overthrown by a spontaneous uprising of the people led by the students. And in terms of the economic miracle that has been much hyped, in the last 5 or 6 years that has dissipated. We had taken a $4.7 billion loan from IMF, And one of the preconditions that we had reiterated or re-emphasized is to reduce corruption. So rising unemployment, rise in inflation, and again, lack of accountability had basically irritated people to no extent. And what one hopes is the relationship between India and Bangladesh is a very old one, and it's a state-to-state relationship. India's relationship cannot be viewed exclusively through the prism of one party or one family. So again, this is an interaction of 1.5 billion people country with a population of 180 million people. So we might agree to disagree on many issues, but the idea is that we live in the same subcontinent. And again, just one more point. And again, as much as India is important to Bangladesh, Bangladesh is also an important constituent of India's policies. And again, if you just think about it, we are basically, again, India is the second largest import partner, or for that matter, again, that we are also undertaking far-reaching comprehensive economic partnership agreements. And if we're talking about...
of course, any relationship between two allies,
any
relationship between two geopolitical allies, two strategic allies is a symbiotic one. So that is, of course, understood, and that's really besides the point. But Ambassador Dayal, would you like to come in on this? Okay, go ahead.
Just one point, and then I'll be happily cede the ground, because again, I didn't address that question. In terms of the geopolitical narrative, even former Prime Minister Hasina had also reached out in balancing between India and China, vis-a-vis, let's say, the acquisition of 2 Chinese submarines from India, or joining basically BRI, or going for basically the BRICS club. So again, China and India are basically 2 facets of a rising Asia. And Bangladesh,
Ambassador
like
Dayal,
many
would you
other
agree with that? Because many would say, many dissenters would say that for Sheikh Hasina, the relationship with India was in a sense sacrosanct, and that perhaps will remain the case, given the fact that India is definitely an important strategic partner of Bangladesh, and of course that is something that's visible in Mr. Yunus's outreach as well. Ambassador Dayal.
Well, Mr. Parvez is absolutely right when he said that the relationship between Bangladesh and India is a state-to-state relationship. And both countries stand to gain a lot if the relationship is smooth and if any problems that arise are ironed out. I must say that there were widespread concerns in India about the situation of the minorities following the overthrow of Sheikh Hasina's government. And in fact, Prime Minister Modi himself said that Indians were worried about the safety of the Hindu community in Bangladesh. And the External Affairs Ministry also said it was monitoring the situation. So there were concerns among the people, and these were reflected in the statements of our leaders. So it's heartening to note that Mr. Muhammad Yunus has promised to take the necessary steps to protect the Hindu community and to prevent any further attacks. There is no denying the fact that there were a very large number of serious attacks. And it's entirely up to the Bangladesh government to prevent such acts from happening again, because only they can prevent such attacks. And it is in the interest of both countries that there is a cordial and harmonious relationship. We need each other, not just in the economic sense, but in the geopolitical sense also. We are not just neighbors, we are friends, and it is important to maintain that friendship.
All right, I'm afraid I just have 30 seconds on the debate. The last word to you, Mr. Abbasi. Go ahead. You had a point to make.
India and Bangladesh have been traditional partners, and I believe that, again, in this new democratic dispensation, despite, again, initial hiccups, I believe we will be able to chart a more harmonious relationship based on mutual parity, respect, and recognition of each other's grievances. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, gentlemen, for being with us. Well, Dr. Mahdi Amin, advisor of the acting chairman of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, the BNP, is joining us live. Of course, he will give us a sense of what really is the interim government's strategy going forward, given the fact there are a lot of concerns over the condition of minorities and also the economic uncertainty as far as Bangladesh is concerned. Dr. Amin, really appreciate your time on NDTV. My first question to you, Mr. Yunus has vowed an all-inclusive government. What is the party and the interim government strategy to, in a sense, establish an all-inclusive dispensation?
We expect the interim government to create an environment where we all can vote freely in fair and credible national election. It is indeed a transition period for restoring democracy in Bangladesh, and the people of Bangladesh have a unified aspiration to elect a government with a public mandate, which in turn can sustainably ensure that the people's rights and freedoms are protected. In the short run, it is imperative for the interim government to make necessary changes in the administration. We have seen in last 16 years how the Army League regime politicized all layers of the state apparatus by appointing party affiliates and beneficiaries in key positions across the hierarchy. So there has to be an urgent action plan to undertake structural and personal changes in the administration. We've already seen that there are changes taking place, but there are still many crucial positions held by the patronizers of the previous regime. So while being greatly appreciative, we would urge, if possible, for an acceleration in the ongoing changes on the government side.
All right, you talked about restoring democracy, but democracy can be restored in the real sense only when there is a level playing field for all political parties. An allegation that, your party and so many other opposition parties, erstwhile opposition parties have made, that there was no level playing field. How do you assure various smaller parties, even in Bangladesh, that there is going to be that level playing field?
Well, now is the time for unity. We have come to a tipping point where, in the face of autocracy versus democracy, it essentially became Army League versus Bangladesh. There is an incredible lot of both illegal and licensed guns with the Army League terrorists, which should be revoked and taken back. We have experienced 16 years of human rights violations, including extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, mass arrests, torture in detentions, and fabricated cases against 6 million people. These false cases need to be addressed, and genuine cases for gross human rights violations should be filed. The recent massacre in July and August, which caused thousands of deaths, countless injuries, and targeted arrests, must be investigated fairly and independently. The people of Bangladesh seek meticulous investigation and appreciate the proactive role of the United Nations. Those responsible should be held accountable, and the victims should get full support from the government, including compensation, help to recover, and promise that such violence will not happen again in Bangladesh. In terms of politics, whether we are big or small party, we all want constructive politics. A politics that's based on merit, not nepotism. A politics that's based on policies, not power. And a politics that's based on unity, not vengeance. Together, we all need to rebuild the nation with great policies and a societal harmony.
So that's an important point you're making, but it's not just about political parties. It's also about reinstating the faith in various institutions. Of course, what we saw in the Supreme Court with so many students ghirawing the Supreme Court, forcing the Chief Justice to step down. So whether it's the Supreme Court or the Election Commission, these institutions have lost trust in people. How do you plan to restore that?
Right, that's a great question. Basically, the situation where we're right now, the society needs stability. We need to support the interim government in every possible way for making the necessary changes in the state institutions. This includes the Election Commission, Judiciary, Field Administration, law enforcement agencies, Anti-Corruption Commission, and the list goes on. The main goal of the interim government should be to return the electoral power to the people, which they rightfully deserve, but was deprived over a decade and a half. The 120 million voters who want to vote and elect a government of their own choice after this democratic transition finishes. The BNP believes the interim government will undertake all the tasks required to facilitate that precious, free, fair, and credible election at the soonest. We also believe an elected government with legitimacy and mandate will establish good governance, public accountability, and the rule of law in Bangladesh. But as you said, in order to achieve this, we need to get the institutions right in the first place. Almost all the top appointments in the last 16 years in state institutions were based on political grounds. The Election Commission itself is a glaring example, as evident in the personal backgrounds and the reflected in the words and actions taken by most of their members. The interim government must remove and replace all the individuals who have proven track record of affiliation or allegiance with the Awami League. They should promote neutral and patriotic individuals from the public service and the civil society who have been suppressed in many, many years for not obeying the illegal orders of the regime or for not complying to act against the interests of the people. For us, we believe this is the time for all the pro-democracy stakeholders to step in and serve the nation with distinction by being neutral, being objective, and for the cause of restoration of democracy in the country.
All right, and my last question to you, Dr. Amin, and it's a two-part question. One, of course, on the situation of minorities, because that, of course, is of huge concern to India, to New Delhi, and also the larger foreign policy, the larger neighborhood policy going forward, given the fact that India and Bangladesh have, of course, been really close allies. We have a long-standing history, and it is a relationship that has benefited both the countries.
So let me start with the minority issue because that's more current. The recent investigations, if we see, by major media outlets like Al Jazeera, BBC, DW, AFP, the local newspaper Pratham Alo, along with many fact checkers, found that the false information about minority repression in Bangladesh is surfacing on social media. These claims of communal violence are based on misleading images, including some from past incidents even in India. No verified reports of rape, temple destruction, or religiously motivated attacks have been found in Bangladesh. It's a distorted narrative aiming to circulate disinformation about the country. In reality, most violence has targeted Muslim homes, particularly those of the Awami League leaders and activists, in retaliation for the gross human rights violations against the ordinary people that they conducted in the last 16 years. Fact checkers from various platforms have confirmed that the unrest is politically motivated rather than being religious. Only a few Hindu families of the Awami League have been affected, while attacks on Muslims have been far more significant in terms of number. After 5th August, after the collapse of the Awami League government, when Bangladesh was without police presence for about 2 weeks, the BNP, as the political party, reflecting the will of the people, mobilized all members of the party from the grassroots to the top leadership to proactively maintain the law and order situation across the country. Our activists worked to protect homes, places of worship, and the general well-being of Muslim and Hindu communities alike with the same commitment and without any division whatsoever. The fact is, the BNP doesn't even endorse the concept of minority. We believe that our leader has repeatedly said that regardless of religion, creed, or class, we are all proud Bangladeshis, united in our shared identity, having the same rights, having the same freedoms, and having the same dignity. Desires of the people by prioritizing their interests and aspirations. It's connected with the people. We will align economically and strategically with democratic nations, institutions, and development partners worldwide. Adhering to the rules-based international order, we will promote good governance, we'll promote human rights, we'll promote labor rights, and we'll promote the rule of law while following the international conventions that a truly democratic and accountable government should follow.
Dr. Amin, thanks very much for being with us. Really appreciate your time. So, of course, this is a story that NDTV will continue to track very, very closely. And as Dr. Amin said, the interim government will make sure that there is no discrimination.